Well, if you're a big fan of maps, then this video has got plenty of map action for you. I'm going to take a look at the forecast for the next few weeks across the UK, and the dry theme continues, but the main crucial aspect of the last few days has been the frost, and a damaging frost last night across some parts of southern Britain. The night before, parts of west and southwest Scotland saw a damaging frost as well, and this map here just highlights how long you have to go back in time to find another night in the month of May that was colder than the one just gone. So you can see for many places across southern Britain, last night was the coldest May night for at least 10 years, and for a few locations as much as 35 years, back into perhaps the 1980s, to find a night in the month of May as cold as the one just gone. So for gardeners and growers, and more importantly for viticulture as well, wine production here, a potentially damaging frost last night. But we have been warning our customers about this potential over the last week or so in the lead up to this particularly cold spell, and it's possible we may see further quite damaging frost over the next few nights before things do improve by the time we get through to the weekend. In terms of looking at how dry things have been, of course, it's been very blocked, very settled really since about mid-March, so we're getting on for about 2 months now with not much in the way of rain, often dry conditions and often dominated by high pressure. This is the latest map from the CEH, from the hydrological outlook for this month. This takes into account how much rain has fallen and the sort of typical conditions going on in the subsurface layers, so not necessarily just the soil moisture we're talking about here, we're talking about everything, sort of subsurface water storage as well. And you can clearly see parts of eastern Scotland, northeast England, very much red. In fact, much of the country is below normal in terms of moisture and water content below the ground. So things have changed quite abruptly from where we were at the end of the winter, of course, after what was a very wet autumn and winter across the UK, and the ground is also very dry. We've had a lot of solar radiation, a lot of sunshine, that's helped dry the ground out, strong winds at times as well, easterly winds, low dew point air, very dry air, all combining really to really dry out the surface layers of the soil as well. And in the last week or so, we've also had the latest irrigation prospects for this summer released by the Environment Agency. So here's another map. Of course, it's just focused on England because that's where the Environment Agency are most interested in for this summer. And things have changed a little bit from their earlier prospects that they published at the end of February, in the sense that things have just started to come down a little bit. So places that were quite good have now come down to moderate since then. So there have been some subtle changes, though it has to be said, we are in a better position now than we were at this time last year, of course. So not quite so bad as last summer, but of course it has been very dry, and if that continues, then things will continue to deteriorate as well. Last year at this time, most areas were in the moderate category. Groundwater levels, having been above average through the winter, have fallen back down to normal for the time of the year, but they are still in decline, and we've now gone past the recharging stages for the aquifers as well. So any further prolonged dry weather will only have a bit of a detrimental impact on groundwater as well. But as you can see right now, many parts of England are in the good to moderate category. There are some areas that need monitoring more closely, and that's northeast England, northwest England and parts of East Anglia, which are currently in the moderate category, but we'll have to see how things evolve over the weeks and months ahead as we head through the warmer season. So taking a look at the forecast, is there any rain in the forecast? This is a question we're being asked lots and lots of times on our phone line, our forecast hotline. Well, in short, not in the next few days. The jet stream at the moment, we haven't looked at the jet stream for a few weeks now, but here it is for this week. A bit of a northerly jet across Scotland, just bringing in that cold Arctic air. Several waves of cold Arctic air sinking south this week, so that's bringing the rather chilly conditions and very cold nights, with the ridge building into that cold air. Now the jet will weaken over the next couple of days, high pressure pretty much over the UK, settling things down. Then notice towards the weekend, more of an active arm of jet stream pushing out across the Atlantic and across northern parts of the UK. So a greater chance of things just changing briefly over the weekend into early next week across the northern half of the UK, where we could see some rain, maybe some stronger winds for a time as well. But further south, high pressure likely to prevail, and therefore the dry conditions likely to dominate through this period as well. So taking a little bit more detail through the next few days, there's our area of high pressure centred to the northwest of the UK on Wednesday, and with that, in that position, we've got a cold northerly wind bringing in that rather cool Arctic air southwards across the UK. And of course, with the high having built into that cold air, that means some pretty chilly nights. So some frost in places to start Wednesday, perhaps not quite so cold across southern Britain. There'll be a bit more cloud compared with the previous night. That high in that position still allows weak weather fronts to drift around the edge of it to bring in some showery bits and pieces of rain every now and again across Scotland, in particular some mountain snow as well, and the odd shower possible in eastern Britain as well. But generally speaking, it's dry through most of this week. Notice how the high just retreats a little bit to the south and allows those areas of low pressure and a bit of rain to get into northern parts of the UK. So western Scotland most prone by the end of the week, and more especially into the weekend. The breeze will be picking up with that as well. So wet and windy, I think, to sum up the weekend across Scotland, maybe parts of Northern Ireland, but much of England and Wales on Saturday at least will still be dry under high pressure. There is a bit of a question mark about what happens on Sunday, because those fronts may just nudge a bit further south into perhaps parts of northern England, perhaps just clipping East Anglia. So that's possible Sunday into Monday. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on in this video. But in the broad sense, the high will be gradually shrinking towards the south of the UK through the weekend. We cut off that northerly wind, we swing the winds round to the west off the Atlantic, so things turning less cold by the weekend, less frost, more cloud in general, and a little bit of rain into the north and the west. And of course, if you're trying to get some spraying done, high pressure is generally good for that because it means light winds. And there will be some reasonable spraying potential over the next few days. As I run this loop through the rest of this week, you can see the green there, the ideal spraying conditions, mainly focused across the central slice of the country, the far north and the far south. Just a bit more breeze here. And it will vary the position of that high day on day, which means the forecast for your part of the world will not be the same every single day. Some days may be better than others for spraying in your part of the UK. So keep up to date with the forecast, because there will be subtle shifts in wind direction and speed each day as that high meanders about over the coming days. But in a broad sense, there should be quite a bit of spraying opportunity until the weekend, and then the winds pick up across northern Britain with that rain coming in. But even on Saturday, a lot of green showing up there in southern Britain, so that's pretty good conditions there for spraying. So with those shifts in type of weather day on day, the best way to keep up to date is to speak to our forecasters who are looking at this information all day, every day. And even though we're working from home, we're still very much available to answer your phone calls on our Forecast Hotline. We're available from 6 in the morning through till 6 in the evening, and we can give you the latest information that we have at hand, and hopefully can help you plan ahead for those ideal spraying conditions. Now into next week, this is how things are likely to start the week on Monday, Tuesday sort of time. So that high pressure still across southern parts of the UK. Weather fronts across the north, so still bringing a bit more cloud and a bit of rain perhaps into north and west Scotland. But as I say, for a time, Sunday into early Monday, there may be the potential for one of those fronts just to slide a bit further south into northern England and maybe parts of East Anglia as well, but one to keep an eye on. As we head towards the middle of next week, that area of high pressure is expected to shift to the east towards Denmark and Germany. And in doing so, we get more of a southerly or southeasterly flow developing. And that means we'll start to source our air from further south, which means temperatures will start to come up even further through next week. So this weekend, we're looking at temperatures in the high teens, perhaps low 20s. We could potentially get close to the mid 20s as we head deeper on into next week and bring our air up from warmer climes. All the while, though, low pressure and weather fronts not too far away from western Scotland. So here you're always most prone to getting a bit of rain at times, and maybe some slightly stronger winds later on in the week as well. But generally speaking, the wind's fairly light for most of next week as things currently stand. Now, we've shown you this table before. This is the chance of getting a dry day on each day, looking at the next 4 weeks or so. And if you want rain, you're ideally looking for the green colours. And if you want it to be dry, of course, you're looking for the brown colours, and very much dominated by brown at the moment for the next few weeks. Now, it's going to be difficult to pick out little details in this, but in a broad sense, there's not a lot of wet days showing up here. So I'm not saying it will be dry every single day for the next 4 weeks, but on balance, it's more likely to be dry on most of the days. So perhaps take 10 days, for example, you may get 2 wet days, but 8 dry days in that sort of period. Now, there are little trends we can pick out looking at this data. First up, from now through until probably next Thursday, VH across much of the country, with one exception really, and that is Monday. And you'll notice that column for Monday the 18th there has slightly lower values, so it's more like high rather than very high for parts of East Anglia, for example, into northern England. And if anything, we actually get into the medium chance of it being dry or wet across northwestern Britain and into Scotland. So that's just a hint that Monday could bring, and this includes the Sunday night period into Monday, a little bit of rain in from the Atlantic across northern England, maybe into East Anglia, but especially northern England and up into Scotland. So that's the one thing to keep an eye on. But apart from that, apart from isolated afternoon showers or the odd shower feeding in from the North Sea, Most places will be dry for the next week or so, apart from Scotland, of course, where we will have some fronts coming in over the weekend. And then towards the end of next week, notice how after Thursday we lose the very highs, they become just bog standard highs, and that's just a hint that perhaps we may see something coming up from the southwest at times. So I would imagine towards the end of next week, as that high drifts a bit further away, potentially, depending on how far away it moves, we may see some thundery imports coming into perhaps southwestern parts of the UK for a time. But the further east you are, closer to the high, the more likely you are to stay somewhat dry. And really there's not a great deal of change beyond that through the remainder of May. As things currently stand, high pressure likely to dominate most of the time. There may be a change in the pattern towards the beginning of June. The change in the month may bring a change in the pattern, but a lot of uncertainty at this stage. And the other aspect we're keeping an eye on obviously is the frost risk, and also how warm things may get by day. So what we've got here is an ensemble plot for Cambridge. It's what we call a box and whisker plot essentially, and as a broad sense, where you see those horizontal bars, when they're very narrow there's high confidence, and when they're very large, looking further ahead in time, that's where confidence is somewhat lower. There's more spread in the possible outcomes as to what the weather may do. And you can see that there's fairly high confidence in how things are going to evolve over the next few days. So you can clearly see there are some pretty chilly nights to be had. Tuesday morning, the one just gone of course, and then again Thursday morning and Friday morning for this location in Cambridge. This is obviously for a city centre value. Out in the countryside it will be colder than these values suggest. So that means Tuesday morning, Thursday morning, Friday morning has the potential for frost. We saw one today, of course, and there's further frost potential later on in this week. But notice, this is the bottom table graph we're looking at here. Notice how the blue boxes start to come up into next week, meaning nights won't be as cold. Gradually, day on day or night on night, it'll be getting less cold at night as we go on to next week. Now, it doesn't mean we wouldn't get the odd pocket of rural frost in the usual prone spots into next week with the high dominating. But in a general sense, the widespread frost that we have seen and may see over the next couple of nights will not be as widespread by the time we get through to the weekend and into next week, and it'll be more localized to the usual areas that get them at this time of the year. In terms of the maximum temperature on the top row there, you can see gradually that climbs up as we go through the weekend and more especially into next week. A big spread by the middle of next week depending on where we can source our air from, whether it's sunny or cloudy and so forth. But there is the potential there to get into the mid-20s, maybe even a touch higher depending on how things play out later on next week. So warming up next week, losing that risk of frost, but in the next few days, just the next 3 or 4 days, there's still that potential for a bit of frost at night in places, depending on cloud cover and wind speed primarily. So this is how things are looking across Europe next week from the 18th right the way through to the 24th of May. The red colours there denoting where pressure is higher than normal. Slap bang right over the UK, pressure is higher than normal for the time of the year. What that means is as the high, remember, drifts to the east of us, we'll tap into a southerly flow. So our temperatures next week, unlike this week, will be above average. But as that high centre is to the east of us, that means on the eastern flank of that, across Scandinavia and Eastern Europe, you've got northerly winds. So hence the blue colours here, Scandinavia, Eastern Europe, below average because of the wind direction coming in primarily from a northerly direction. But with high pressure dominating, much of Europe here showing up in the browns, indicating drier than average or even completely dry in some places. Now notice eastern Spain, across the Mediterranean, Sicily, Sardinia and so forth. We've got a cut-off low here, which we've been affecting parts of France this week. That could give us several days of rain showers and thunderstorms, and so here above average rainfall, most likely through the Mediterranean, but most places across Europe drier than normal. Now looking further ahead into week 3, this is the last week of May. And the high pressure pretty much close to the UK. The position of it will be somewhat uncertain at this stage, but overall pressure higher than normal for the time of the year across much of northern and western Europe. So that then translates to slightly above average temperatures still across western Europe. Again, it's still chilly in the east, below average temperatures here with more of a northerly flow to things. And the rainfall pattern fairly similar across northwest Europe, below average generally speaking. Above average though, notice across Iberia, and also developing across eastern parts of Europe as well, turning wetter here through the latter part of May. Now here's the pressure pattern for the beginning of June, the first week of June, and there's not a clear signal either way. A lot of white on there, meaning near normal. And what tends to happen is models at this range tend to trend towards climatology, what normally happens at this time of the year. Now remember, there's some uncertainty in the forecast, potentially as an impact from the lack of aircraft at the moment, taking measurements in the upper atmosphere and how that may play out further down the line. So that's one aspect we have to consider. The other aspect, of course, at this time of the year is there tends to be several rounds of severe thunderstorms that develop over the central plains of the US. And when they happen, they release a lot of energy into the atmosphere, and that can disrupt the jet stream, and that will ultimately affect how the jet stream shape evolves as that comes out of the US and across the Atlantic towards us. So naturally, from mid-May onwards every year, there's probably more uncertainty than normal because of these thunderstorms that develop at this time of the year in the what's known as Tornado Alley. So that's something we have to consider for June as well, is that there may be some uncertainty. But what tends to happen is as the continent continues to heat up and there's still some relatively cool air to our north, that for a time reinvigorates the jet stream, and that's why we tend to get what's called a return of the westerlies in June, which means the jet stream tends to strengthen. We tend to turn more unsettled into the beginning of June as well. Not saying that will happen this year necessarily, but that's something that could happen and tends to happen more often than not. At the moment, the temperature anomaly here showing above average across a good chunk of Western and Southern Europe, colder than average, I notice, across Scandinavia and northeastern parts of Europe. And right now, the rainfall anomaly is not as dry looking as the previous 2 weeks. It's still drier than average across eastern England, notice, but the west is near normal. Still wetter than average across western Iberia, notice. So it's just a hint that there may be a slight pattern change as we change the month. Until then, though, it is often dry with high pressure dominating. Chilly this week with a bit of frost around at night, but turning less cold or warmer through the weekend and more especially on into next week. And then possibly some rain into the west and northwest by this weekend and into the beginning of next week, but many places dry, apart from maybe Monday. And then possibly turning more unsettled as we head towards the beginning of June. As I say, it's still a long way off. There's low confidence, but just basing it on things that tend to happen at this time of the year and what may evolve as we head towards the beginning of June, that may see a change in the pattern. But one to keep an eye on, not making any promises yet. It's a long way off, and we will, of course, keep you updated on our weekly bulletins of the farming forecast. So there we go, that's how things are looking. As ever, you can keep up to date with a day-by-day forecast by following us on our social media accounts, and of course our daily updated podcast for East Anglia on our website as well. Bye for now.